A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to visit the UK Home Office scientific research facility on the outskirts of London to have a look at how CCTV had been used in tracking and for law enforcement purposes in relation to the 7/7 bombers. It's a daunting experience going to the UK Home Office scientific facility. Your cab can't approach it within about half a kilometre, so it's quite a long walk in the rain. There are very high fences, and I remember on that particular occasion that the fences were patrolled by dogs who looked at me with great suspicion. But once inside, I actually had the opportunity to look at the way CCTV had been stitched together right across England to track the movements of the suicide bombers from the moment they entered the train carriages back basically to their doorstep when they left home that morning. I watched them park their cars, I watched them enter train stations at Reading and across the Midlands of England and the north of England. Quite an incredible demonstration of the effectiveness of the use of CCTV in relation to law enforcement. Back then, and I think it was around about this time in 2009, the Metropolitan Police had used many members visually looking at CCTV footage to try and recognise the suicide bombers. These days, I think my iPhone would probably be able to accomplish that task, which just shows how technology has moved in this particular area and how important it is to take into account. If you leave with no other key message today from me, please leave it with this. Privacy doesn't prevent appropriate community safety measures like CCTV. Good privacy and security practices enables best practice and the design and implementation of systems that enhance safety, privacy and security and provide a foundation for community confidence in CCTV systems. CCTV surveillance has become a common feature of our daily lives. Our images are caught on numerous CCTV cameras as we move about the city, suburbs, visit shops and shopping centres, attend offices and sporting arenas, travel on the road and on the public transport network. Although the use of CCTV continues to enjoy general public support, it necessarily involves intrusion into the lives of ordinary individuals as they go about their day-to-day activities. The public expects CCTV systems to be used responsibly with effective safeguards in place. Maintaining public trust and confidence in its use is essential if its benefits are to be realised and its use is not to be viewed with suspicion or cynicism. In the past, because most CCTV systems were of fairly poor quality, the images they captured were not considered to qualify as being personal information, and privacy legislation was not generally considered to apply to them. The situation has now changed with advances in and the lower cost of camera and recording technologies. In Victoria, any public sector organisation that deploys modern CCTV systems is likely to be using equipment that's of sufficient quality to capture personal information and thus bring it within the jurisdiction of the Information Privacy Act. The Information Privacy Act is principles-based and technology neutral, and it governs the collection, use, disclosure and handling of personal information, including the security of personal information. It establishes fundamental privacy safeguards through a set of 10 principles that are derived from international benchmarks that have been adopted by many jurisdictions across the world. I thought I might touch on some of the most fundamental. So IPP1 is one of the critical principles that's necessary to take into account, and it sets out principles such as an organisation must not collect personal information unless it's necessary for one or more of its functions or activities. It must collect personal information only by lawful and fair means and not in an unreasonably intrusive way. And it goes through notice requirements. At or before the time personal information is collected, the organisation must take reasonable steps to ensure individuals are aware of issues such as the identity of the organisation and how to contact it, the fact that he or she is able to gain access, the purpose for which the information is collected, to whom it's usually disclosed, any law that requires the particular information to be collected, and any consequences if it's not provided. That particular requirement can be addressed through a combination of signage and policy, either on websites or available in local offices. The information privacy principles also deal with the security of personal information through Information Privacy Principle 4, which says that an organisation must take reasonable steps to protect personal information it holds from misuse and loss from unauthorised access, modification or disclosure. The Department of Justice has provided high-level guidance about how to address these issues and to operationalise them in its guide to developing CCTV for public safety in Victoria. The guide sets out ways in which issues such as privacy and security can be operationalised into the design, deployment and management of CCTV systems. It's important to consider what some of those guiding principles are. They start by saying that people are entitled to a reasonable expectation of privacy when in public places, that owners of CCTV in public places should act responsibly and consider the reasonable expectations of individuals' privacy. Owners of CCTV should take reasonable steps to inform people of the use of the devices. Use of CCTV should be for a legitimate purpose related to the activities of the organisation managing it. CCTV surveillance should be proportional to its legitimate purpose. This means the use of CCTV in public places must be limited to a set of clearly defined purposes or objectives and identified areas. Reasonable steps should be taken to protect information gathered through public place surveillance from misuse and inappropriate disclosure. Owners of CCTV systems must be known and accessible to the public, must be accountable for its proper use. The guide establishes clear linkages with privacy requirements when it states, objectives with CCTV projects should align with the guiding principles set out in the guide. At this point, organisations need to consider the following two principles: that your CCTV project is for a legitimate purpose and relates to the activities of your organisation, and the level of surveillance is proportionate to its legitimate purpose. A legitimate purpose requires a direct connection between the organisation's operations and the surveillance practice. The connection should not be trivial or incidental. A proportionate response is one that uses the least intrusive means to achieve its purpose. Those really are the fundamental rules and the fundamental principles that need to be addressed in establishing CCTV systems. And some of the information that Chris went through in the previous presentation echo or hook back in or link with those sorts of principles in terms of the funding for CCTV systems. One of the things that I wanted to do in this context is briefly refer to the comparatively recent New South Wales case, SF against Shoalhaven Council. The New South Wales Administrative Decision Tribunal found that a CCTV operating system in Nowra failed to comply with the New South Wales equivalent to the Information Privacy Act. As you'd all be aware, that the case caused widespread concern and prompted the New South Wales Government to urgently amend its privacy law. It was a very curious piece of legal reasoning. The tribunal found that insufficient notice, and I just go back to what I said a few moments ago about notice and notice requirements, that insufficient notice had been given of the equivalent New South Wales requirements to Information Privacy Principle 1.3 and suggested that individuals need to be made actually aware of the relevant notice requirements. From my perspective, it's just incredibly difficult to see how that is a correct piece of legal reasoning. Both the New South Wales requirement, or at least the one that existed at the time, and the Victorian requirement do not require actual notice. What they do require is that organisations take reasonable steps to ensure that individuals are aware of the relevant requirements. More relevant was the finding that there were no reasonable safeguards in place to secure the personal information collected by the CCTV system. Although there was a process in place to require the entry of a username and password to log into the live feed, the practice was to use generic passwords, which meant that monitoring and auditing of system use was impeded. In addition, there was no training given to staff about appropriate security practice. A breach of the equivalent of IPP4 in Victoria was found. In that sense, the case highlights the need for basic security processes and procedures to be implemented as part of good CCTV practice. This can be done quite easily and inexpensively through computer processes that require the entry of secure passwords and the changing of passwords on a periodic basis. I think we're all used to that as common practice. and through basic security training and awareness. If you want a further analysis of the Shoalhaven case from my perspective, or from Privacy Victoria's perspective, quite a lengthy analysis of it was done in the most recent edition of Privacy Aware, which can be found on the Victorian Privacy Commissioner's website, which is privacy.vic.gov.au. If you look under publications and then look for the most recent issue of Privacy Aware, you'll find an analysis, and you'll find that we were quite puzzled by the Shoalhaven Council decision. I really don't think that could happen in Victoria. Let me go back to my original message to you, that neither privacy and security impede or prevent the proper use of CCTV. They're both important in providing the community with the assurance that CCTV will be used responsibly and transparently, and that it is and remains fit for purpose. In this context, privacy and security are most appropriately conceptualised as enabling the development and implementation of appropriate CCTV systems, not as preventing it.
Do the privacy laws come into force on a private property? I'm thinking about a retail shop with a camera, something like that.
There's a federal privacy law called the Privacy Act 1988, which applies to the private sector. The Victorian Information Privacy Act, the one that I administer, applies to the public sector. So a council-run CCTV system is covered by my legislation. For a private sector retailer, that's covered by Commonwealth legislation, which has very similar privacy principles, although they're about to change a bit in early 2014. What you need to understand, though, is that there's an exemption for small business in the federal legislation. So unless you have a turnover exceeding $3 million, it doesn't apply to you.